This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla in the new Full Battle Rattle studios.
And you'll get to know him more and more. You'll have even more respect, not just for his record of success and the good intentions for America, but who he is as a person. He's not an elitist. And yes, as a multi-billionaire, we still root him on because he roots us on.
It's official. Donald J. Trump is the President of the United States. Trump sworn in this past week in Washington, D.C. to become our 45th president. Truly a great time for our exceptional nation. And with Palin-endorsed Trump now in charge and Barack Obama out, just amazing news for our Second Amendment. Today we'll talk with Dan Wass about our right to bear arms and about his book, Good Gun, Bad Guy. Dan Wass coming up. Plus, we'll have the latest national and Alaska headlines and Sarah Palin news. We'll visit the Crow's Nest with Tanya Crow in California. Also from the Golden State, Kelly Carlson is on target. And a brand new installment of Liberty and Legacy with Tamara Colbert coming up from Texas. You don't want to miss this one. Sarah Hagmeyer is off. We'll have a new millennial forecast next week. Welcome to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. The Palin Update is sponsored by Full Battle Rattle. Full Battle Rattle, helping veterans suffering from combat-related disabilities through the healing power of music. Learn more at facebook.com/Full Battle Rattle ABQ. Believe it.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend
the
Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
A glorious day this past week in our nation's capital as Donald J. Trump took the oath of office. Trump now President Trump. A victory for liberty and freedom. Trump, backed by Sarah Palin, shocked the establishment by winning the GOP nomination and then trouncing Hillary Clinton in the general. Now with Obama and his far-left European agenda out the door, Americans are hopeful to make America great again. One of the biggest sighs of relief in Trump's inauguration comes from gun owners. Today we talked to an expert on firearms, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Mr. Dan Wass. Dan Wass, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
Oh, Kevin, I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
We are doing wonderfully. We have a new president, and, it's great to finally be able to say President Trump on this program and get rid of the elect part. And, I do want to get into that with you in a moment as far as talking about our gun rights and our precious Second Amendment. And what I want to ask you before we get into your wonderful book is just in general, as a gun and firearm expert and an expert on our Second Amendment, when Donald Trump was sworn in this past week, is that immediately a huge deal for our Second Amendment and for gun owners everywhere? Because we have a Supreme Court situation coming up. I mean, we could have had Hillary Clinton as the president.
It would have been a nightmare if she became president. But here's the great thing: it is absolutely changes everything because now we have the leverage. And what's going to happen now, in my hope, is that we start to change the gun narrative because right now we've been living under 8 years of an anti-gun narrative that's been full of propaganda, lies, angry rhetoric, and just all sorts of nonsense. Now we get to change that narrative to an honest narrative about guns. And it was great because I saw Sean Spicer and President Trump. Also feels good to say that. President Trump saying today they're going to hold the media accountable, and that was the greatest thing to hear.
And you make a great point, too. We mentioned Hillary, but, I mean, this is addition by subtraction, too, getting rid of the far-left policies of Barack Obama and the way just manipulated every situation of a crime when a gun was involved, from Sandy Hook to your regular everyday things, yet never a mention of anything in Chicago or the real problems in this country, or when there's an attack carried out with a knife or a vehicle, and there's silence there, too. So the hypocrisy and the false narrative, it's just maddening for those who know the truth.
And I think that's the worst part, and that's what I talk about mostly in the book, is the false narrative. Now, people don't realize how important the narrative is, that it's an honest narrative, because when you create a false narrative and you perpetuate it like the left does, it really does seep into the minds of people, and they start to believe it. It's not, whether it's true or not, and they'll use terminology. And another thing I talk about in the book is the terminology that they use. We talk about gun violence. Why do you think they put those two words together? That's at the core of their narrative. It's the core of the anti-gun agenda, gun violence. They want you to envision guns being violent. They want to take the focus off the perpetrators, because if we were to talk about the bad guys and the human element of this whole thing, we'd be shining a spotlight on failed liberal policies. We'd have to talk about inner city crime. We'd have to talk about gang violence and drugs and open borders and Islamic terrorism. We'd have to talk about all that stuff, and that wouldn't look very good for left-wing policymakers.
Well, you nailed it. I mean, especially when it comes to jihadists and things like that, it's always right, the gunman. But if it's a knife attack, if it's an attack with your hands, if it's an attack with a vehicle, you don't hear, the knife wielder as the headline, as the number one thing. And it's often on like the 16th page, under the WNBA scores, rather than, up there up top where it should be. Well, that book that Dan is mentioning, Good Gun, Bad Guy, and talk about endorsements, people who are just champions for our Second Amendment, raving about your book. Tell us more about it, Dan, how people can get it, and what you want to expose here, because I guess, one thing that I got from it is that you want people to understand the mindset, as crazy as it may be, from the left and from the anti-gun, because that's the only way we, as Americans who believe in this God-given right, are able to combat the nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I do in this book. I try to, and just so everybody listening knows, there was a time that I was what you might call, and what I call, anti-gun. I was raised in a pro-gun family. My dad brought me target shooting and hunting, but then there was a time after he died that I went anti-gun. I got caught up in it myself. It wasn't until I had a situation in my life where I was, my wife and I were in a situation with this guy, and I tell the story in the book. But to make a long story short, I realized in that moment, I had one of those aha moments that, my responsibility as a man, as a husband, as a father, is to protect myself and my family. And in that moment, that night, I apologized to my wife because I don't know that I would have been able to. That's the moment it all turned for me. That's the moment that I saw everything clear and realized how important it is to protect yourself. So, but the lies that they're telling on the left, and the imagery and the manipulation that they're doing to people to help them believe that guns are dangerous and gun owners are recklessly putting them in danger and all that nonsense. It's horrible. So now we have to turn that narrative around, and we have to give people an honest picture of what's really going on. And just real quick, Jan Morgan, my good friend, she wrote the foreword to this book. She's a champion for the Second Amendment. She's a true patriot, along with Larry Pratt. He got behind me here, and he's supporting it, and a bunch of other people. So there's a whole movement of pro-Second Amendment advocate patriots out there, and we're going to change things starting now.
Well, Jan Morgan, of course, a great friend to this program, and, you know, she endorses something when it has to do with our Second Amendment. We definitely, take notice. But that's powerful, Dan, what you just mentioned, that, here you were, you would consider anti-gun, and then to have a situation happen to you, makes me think of one of our contributors here, Kelly Carlson, who does our On Target segment. Same thing there. She was stalked for a while. She had this horrible situation, and now she also a firearms expert and an advocate, and particularly for women. And it's not just with guns. I've heard this in other aspects too. We have an immigration problem, obviously, an illegal immigration problem. And the people who understand that the most are usually legal immigrants. So when you go back and talk to people who actually have, walked the walk, and not just, this academic room that the Obama types have been in, but yet their wallet would be stolen in 5 minutes in Brooklyn. You really understand it more, and I think that makes it more powerful. You're not a guy that, hey, I like guns and I'm writing about them. You had life experiences and a change of thought, which I think people can really appreciate, because, and especially when you get to the coasts, Dan, when you look at people in New York and in Chicago and, Boston, Los Angeles, they're just around people who just think guns themselves, guns are bad. This is in their head.
Yeah, and one of the things that I talk about is the way they create. See, there are two types of anti-gunners as I profile them. There's the anti-gunner who typically is uninformed. They never owned guns. They're scared of guns. They don't have any real information. But they don't necessarily want our rights taken away, but they would be happy if guns just disappeared. But then you have the anti-Second Amendment radicals, and these are the ones who do want our rights taken away, and they fight hard every day to make that happen. They also are very influential over anti-gunners and over just non-gun owners. So, and one of the things that they do typically is they'll use people's emotions to make them go against guns.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll use fear. So they'll teach people to be fearful that the gun is unpredictable and dangerous. That way people stay away from the range. They don't want to learn. They want to stay away. They want nothing to do with it because guns scare them. Then they'll teach those same people to hate gun owners because gun owners are putting them in danger and recklessly putting their lives in danger and all this stuff. So they start to hate gun owners. So now you got an anti-gun warrior who's scared of guns, so they don't go to the range, and they hate gun owners. So they'll stay there and fight us. So it's a crazy situation with what's happening to people. And the manipulation is terrible, and we're here to stop it.
So with the real radicals, and unfortunately they have a voice because the media loves to get them on, even though they may be a fringe group, they appear bigger because of the microphone and the television cameras. I mean, it's beyond ignorant and beyond an activist situation. I mean, it's almost diabolical because you're sitting there waiting for tragedy, waiting for bad things to happen, and then capitalizing it with a false narrative, whether it be Sandy Hook or the Pulse nightclub or whatever. As soon as a firearm's involved, forget about that. The guy is, clearly praising ISIS on the way in and out. The gun did it, and then this is in the heads of our kids, and our college kids, and people everywhere.
Yeah, they do it in two ways. People are most influential. There are two ways. When you're in a heightened state of emotion, which like after a Sandy Hook incident, after 9/11, after things like that. That's why you remember where you were in 9/11. Everybody does. And Sandy Hook, as soon as people are in that fearful and angry state, they will trot the guns across the TV screen and tell you this is the problem. So now people associate that fear and anger with guns. And the other way to do it is just through sheer repetition. And that's why you'll see the same things over and over, the same terminology: Wild West, assault weapon, like I said, gun violence, and all these terms that they use. So two ways to influence people. One, get them when they're in a heightened state of emotion. Two, repetition.
And for lack of a better term, they love to jump the gun, too. We look at the Ohio State situation recently where you had a guy on campus terrorizing students, and there were tweets put out by quote-unquote mainstream media, gunmen loose on campus. Turns out later, no gun. And not only the media, but Hillary Clinton's running mate, Senator Tim Kaine. Oh, I'm sorry to hear about this awful gun violence. Turns out, no gun on the guy, used a car.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's again, that's the thing that they want to do. They want you to focus on that gun as the culprit. That's why you don't see you never heard of the term car violence or bat violence or knife violence. The batter. If you were to refer to someone who beat somebody to death with a baseball bat, you refer to them as the batter. It would be ridiculous because people know it's the human being that did the act. But they need to tie that human emotion or that human act to the gun. They want to humanize the gun so you are scared of it. Because my gun has never pulled its own trigger.
Never.
My gun has never come out of my belt and pulled its own trigger. It's never jumped off the table and hurt anybody. It doesn't do anything unless I decide it's going to do something.
They also want to hide from the real problems in society of why these people are killing each other in Chicago and everywhere else and not talking about it. And I think we learn things from the very young. I teach my children. I mean, my son, obviously into guns as any red-blooded American boy would be, but he also knows, hey, Dad, if I ever find a real one, I tell you or I tell someone I don't touch it. You talk about the rules. You talk about what they're for. You talk about why we need them, why we use them, why it's our right. And then you run into children. I mean, we had a neighbor. She wasn't allowed to play guns even with her finger right away. That was, and of course these national stories that we've seen, the Pop-Tart and the pancake that looked like a gun and they're kicking kids out of school. I mean, what else would you think when there's so many loud megaphone voices who are in the face of our very young trying to get this in from an early age? But now, like you said, with a NRA-endorsed president and a Republican Congress, Senate, and here we go with the Supreme Court. Let's hope, happy days ahead, Dan.
Yeah, we're going to teach them how to be American.
All right, it is Good Gun, Bad Guy, and Dan, the book available on your website?
Yeah, you can go to goodgunbadguy.com or .net, or you can find it on Amazon. It's available out there, and I'm sure people are going to like it. I really open up the topic, and I don't think anybody has really written on this type of level with respect to guns. We've a lot of great books out there with statistics, a lot of gun safety things, a lot of things. Nobody's ever really talked about the anti-gunner quite the way I think I'm doing here.
Well, Dan, we really appreciate it. We hope everybody checks it out. Endorsed by Jan Morgan, too. And, hey, before we let you go, you're a Corvette guy.
Yeah, I have been for a long time. I've had many. I just love them. My
grandfather was. He had 3, and the last one he had was the 85, and I got a chance to drive that as a young guy. And, you don't know till you get behind one. You're like, whoa, this is like you're on a rail. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And now my kids, a lot because of the Prince song, but also because I point them out on the road, they are into vets now. And we have a Chevy truck right now. We need room with the dogs and the kids, but maybe one day. But, what a great vehicle. Have you been to Carlisle, Pennsylvania?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I have. And I've been to a lot of different shows. I love the all Corvette shows. So and I just got back actually from Mecum Auction, which was really cool too, in Florida. There's some serious cars. I love vets, but I also have a passion for some other vehicles too. But we always have at least 2 or 3 vets around here, and my son, same thing. He just loves it. Dad, which one can I drive today?
Yeah, I bet, right? That's a good problem to have. It's like having 2 good quarterbacks. All right, well, here we are, Dan Watts. We really appreciate it. Good gun, bad guy, and we wish you the best. We hope to talk to you again down the road, and very optimistic as the Trump administration now officially in Washington.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kevin. It's great to know you, and we can do this anytime you'd like. I'd be happy to.
For more on Dan Watts and his new book, visit goodgunbadguy.com.